It's a great pleasure and a great honor to be back here at this fantastic conference, which is the only one I really know that combines has an understanding that farming and the rest of the living world are completely integrated and the fates are totally entwined. Okay, so this talk is based on my most recent book, mainly. I'm going to go through a few different aspects of culture. First of all, we're going to start with the animal we know best, which is human beings. All human beings have culture, and human beings around the world have very different kinds of cultures. And that brings up the question about what is culture and what is culture for. If we understand that a little bit for humans more intuitively, we can start looking at culture in other kinds of beings. And despite the fact that there are a lot of different kinds of human cultures that do a lot of things very differently, the basic humanity of human beings always shines through the differences in culture. So if culture is so different, what is it? It's not technology and art and religion. Those are products of culture. Culture is the behavior and the preferences and the habits and the skills and even the attractions that flow socially, that we learn from other individuals. That's what culture is. Culture does some things. One is it gives us an identity. It tells us who we are because we know who we are by who we are with. And I think most importantly, culture answers a question, which is how do we live here where we happen to be? That's really what culture is. Culture is the answer to that question. When cultures change, we may lose our sense of who we are and how we do things, and cultures are changing very quickly in many places. Indigenous cultures are becoming more westernized in many places. The role of women is changing in different cultures, and this can have a disorienting effect. It can be difficult to cope with. It's a period of transition in which we are not exactly sure how we do things here where we live. Where do we get our culture from? Mostly we get our culture from our mother first. And just to help understand how important it is to have an understanding of how we do things here where we live, consider two different kinds of culture. People who grew up in a place like the Amazon, in indigenous cultures, they know how to live in the Amazon. They can survive there, no problem. And if they grow up in the Arctic, they know how to live in the Arctic, and they can survive there, no problem. But if you take somebody who grew up in the Amazon and you drop them in the Arctic, they will simply die. And if you take somebody who grew up in the Arctic and you drop them in the rainforest, they will simply die. That's the importance of culture. It can be extremely fundamental as a matter of life and death. We're not the only ones who get our culture from our mothers. There are a large array of other species for which culture is really important. I'm not claiming that culture is really important for all species or even all species of vertebrates. We're talking about animals here. But it is very important for a lot more than we tend to give it credit. Certainly apes, certainly elephants, where you have to learn how to live from your family. And certainly whales, other cetaceans. In some cetaceans, for instance, some dolphins, the culture includes exploiting a relationship with human beings, exploiting fishing opportunities that are created by humans, and in some cases it actually goes two ways, where some cetaceans have learned to herd fish toward human fishers as a way for them to get more fish, because the fishing people, they throw nets that injure some fish spill out, and the and the dolphins who have driven the fish toward those fishing people can benefit in that way. But they have to learn how to do that. That's a cultural thing. Baby parrots learn cultures from others. In this case, the culture is a little bit more subtle. It's not as obvious as something like a chimpanzee or a dolphin might be. But if you're a parrot, you may learn things like where to go to which clay, what it's called a clay lick here, where they eat the soil, mostly for sodium and maybe for some other nutrients. But they go to particular places that their family has brought them to, their parents have brought them to. They go there for the rest of their lives. They can also incorporate humans into their culture. Here in this photograph is a macaw that was raised as a chick. It was an orphan. It was raised as a chick at a research station that's attached to a tourist lodge. And what these macaws have learned is how to live a life of larceny and pilfering. But they also know the difference between different kinds of people. In this particular place, they tend to leave brown people alone because the brown people are locals and they know how to thwart the attempts of the macaws. The white people are afraid of them, so that they tend to focus their attention on the white people who jump back rather than parry forward and let the macaws have their pancakes and their rolls and things like that. So that's part of their culture because their wild chicks are brought to the tourist lodge and they learn how to do that. I myself raised a screech owl. She's the subject of my upcoming book, which is going to be called Alfie and Me, What Owls Know and What Humans Believe. That'll be out in October in the US. But anyway, she's become part of our family culture. She has a wing in our world and we have a foot in her world, but her wild children actually are completely wild. They're not tame. They don't interact with us at all. And actually, right as I was preparing to come over here and pack up the other night, 2 nights ago, she was hatching her third brood of chicks. So she's still very much with us. But she's part of our culture. She's learned to live and survive in a way that depends on us, actually. Her wild mate does not. Her family does not. So culture also creates community. When we tend to look at other species, we label them as species, and then we think we've seen them. We say there's a chimpanzee, there are some killer whales or some orcas, and there are some elephants. That is not really how they see themselves, however. These are not just 3 chimpanzees if you happen to be one of them. These are individuals. They have individual histories, and they also have individual aspirations. Chimpanzees are very, male chimpanzees especially, are very, very concerned with status and rank, and they are very ambitious, and they're a bit scheming, and they make plans. So what you see here is that one Hawa, he is the most dominant male in his group. Musa might have been at one time, and he was a contender, but he lost the last power struggle to Hawa. And why are they right next to each other? Because they are what we would call frenemies. They can't afford to lose track of what the other is doing because they are kind of locked in a lifelong struggle for the next chance for one of them to grab more of the status and more of the access in that group. And the one in the back there, Simon, he's an up-and-coming young male. He's a threat to the ones in the front. He knows it, and they know it, and that's why they're all together, because they can't trust one another. Okay, so as I said, we see them as basically one thing. If you look at the faces here, you can see their faces are as different as our faces are. It's a bit more obvious to them. It's very obvious to the researchers who can actually tell them all as individuals, if they see them walking away, I can do that with human beings that I know. They can do it with the chimpanzees that they know. And the chimps can definitely do that. There's actually been research showing that chimpanzees easily identify photographs of the backs of other chimpanzees in their group. Most chimpanzees start life with a white face or a light-colored face that darkens to black as they age. And they seem to have solved one problem that we seem incapable of solving, which is that they understand that what color your face is doesn't matter. So these are chimpanzees in the process of being acculturated. It's not a lot of action. You don't see that much if you're trying to study how they get to learn their culture. They learn it like we do. It takes them their entire childhood. It takes them many years, and they learn it by hanging around mostly with their mother the whole time. They're pretty inseparable. So they know exactly who they are. They know exactly what they're doing. They understand culturally what group they belong to, and therefore what group they are rivals of. What do they have to learn? They have to learn everything about being a chimpanzee. They have to learn how you interact with others that are higher status, lower status, equal status. They have to learn where food is, what food is, when food ripens. They don't just wander around looking for food in their case. They commute specifically to specific trees and specific places where they're looking for specific foods at specific times of the year. If they check a tree that they know and it's not ripe yet, they will come back maybe a week later to that tree. They understand exactly what's going on in their lives, and they have to learn how to hunt as well. So they learn everything that they need to know. If you imagine a chimpanzee that is born in captivity, raised in captivity, and then brought to the best chimpanzee habitat in the world and released, it will die because it doesn't have the culture that teaches it how to survive. They need to learn how to do things like make tools. If you happen to be a baboon, just to change primates for a second, you will learn culturally how to check every single door at the research station every morning when the researchers leave, because you will have learned that every once in a while you hit the jackpot, the door's not locked properly, and you can go in and rampage and rummage and have a lot of fun. Okay, let's go out to sea here with Shane Garrow and sperm whales. Sperm whales are another very cultural animal. The weirdest thing for me about spending time with groups of sperm whales is that even though these creatures look pretty bizarre by our standards, their head is like more than a third of their body, they're very mammalian. They're constantly greeting and rubbing and doing all the mammal things that we are familiar with if we have dogs, for instance, who greet us when we come home in a very tactile kind of a way. Their social organization is very, very much like elephants. They live in female-led family groups where the oldest female is the leader because she knows the most and has the longest memory. Everybody follows her daughters, their children, and then at adolescence, the males go off like elephants do. They have a different kind of a social life. So there's a lot of interesting things about sperm whales. I'm very much running out of time. I can't go into them too much, but they have a very complex and layered social organization of individuals, families, clans that families belong to. If you're in a clan, you will interact. If you're in a different clan, you will not interact with others of a different clan. It's kind of like different human cultures with different languages that have a hard time understanding each other, what to do, where we go. They do it differently. And they know that by vocalizations that they make. Culture affects evolution. This is something that I think is basically unrecognized. There are different kinds of orca whales, and what's different about them is what they hunt. The ones that hunt fish live in big, noisy groups that scare fish into dense aggregations where they can hunt them more effectively. The ones that hunt mammals hunt in tiny little groups, maybe 3 at a time. They hunt silently because mammals can hear them coming and can react differently. If you are a mammal hunter, you cannot interact with fish hunters. You will mess each other up. The fish hunters will make too much noise. The mammal hunters won't scare the fish together. And so the cultural groups avoid each other. They have avoided each other for 200,000 or 300,000 years, and they are evolving separately because of cultural differences. Culture seems able to drive evolution in a bunch of circumstances, not just whales. I don't have time to go into how it seems to do it with certain fish and with certain birds, but that's something that I talk about in my book. And lastly, we are going to talk about, one final point on culture driving evolution. There are some birds that are in the same genus where a population is entirely inside the range of another population, and the only obvious difference is their song is different. And the ones that sing one song stick with the ones that sing the same song and breed with only those, and so do the others. But inside that range, they are segregating themselves culturally, and that is helping them to continue to evolve differently. The main difference in that is their culture. Okay, the last thing is conservation. We usually talk about biodiversity as the diversity among species, within a species, and the diversity of habitats. That is really a strictly genetic sense of diversity. It doesn't cover the overlooked dimension of diversity, which is culture, which is really important. This is a thick-billed parrot. They were extirpated in the southwest United States, and some biologists wanted to bring them back. So they got some that were raised in captivity, brought them out, and opened the cages. They all died. They didn't know how to live there, and there was nobody there to show them what is food, where are the roosting sites, what's dangerous, and where do we travel to. There's a bird in Australia that is getting so rare that the young males have no older male tutors from which to learn how to sing properly. Since they can't sing the song of their species, females don't want them. So even though they're getting rarer and rarer, in the rare cases where a male meets a female, the male doesn't have the cultural skills to be attractive to the female, and this is accelerating their decline toward extinction. So culture is learned from elders. It creates in-groups and out-groups. It promotes specialization. And it's an active way that life chooses who to be with and how to live, and chooses to create much of the visual beauty that we see. I didn't have time to talk about that. I'm already over time here. So that's what I came to talk to you about. I want to thank these people in the field who helped me to learn and understand all of these things I'm sharing with you today. And I want to thank the other enculturated beings in our family. So thank you very much.